The rain had fallen in a relentless, somber cadence all evening, drenching the cracked pavement and leaving behind a faint odor of gasoline that clung stubbornly to every surface. In the weak glow of oversaturated streetlights, those once bright beacons now reduced to tired, flickering halos, the urban sprawl revealed its scars. Peeling paint on walls, puddles reflecting grim faces, and abandoned cars with shattered windows. Amidst this decaying cityscape, Officer Raymond Henderson patrolled his beat, his patrol car idling with an engine that droned like a distant, unyielding heartbeat. Henderson was a man of few words and fewer scruples, a veteran policeman whose uniform, once a symbol of duty and justice, had morphed into a heavy shackle that reminded him of every brutal command he had ever carried out. On that rain-soaked evening, the leather of his belt creaked with each measured step as he strode towards a narrow alleyway where a figure had been reported. The sound was a steady metronome to his inner rage, a reminder of past transgressions that his conscience tried desperately to silence. In the dim light, the target emerged, a tall, lean black man whose calm, inscrutable eyes betrayed nothing of the turmoil beneath. Michael, as he was known to few, walked with an unhurried purpose that belied the underlying current of determination and secret power. His steps were measured, almost meditative, as he navigated the slick streets with the precision of someone who had learned early on that survival demanded both caution and calculated risk. Unbeknownst to Henderson, Michael's quiet presence concealed a remarkable hidden status, a fact that would eventually unravel the facade of oppression that the officer so relished. The confrontation began with a harsh and deliberate intrusion into Michael's space. Henderson's gravelly voice sliced through the night. "You people always have trouble with the law." His words, rough and dismissive, were not meant to engage in dialogue, but to assert dominance, to establish a hierarchy in which Michael was nothing more than a subordinate element of the urban disorder. Michael's eyes flickered momentarily with a blend of defiance and cool composure. His voice, even in the face of blatant provocation, was steady and measured. "Are you sure you want to record this?" The subtle challenge in his tone was layered with unspoken warning, a reminder that every action carried consequences. It was as if Michael's calmness masked a hidden arsenal, a power that he had cultivated in silence and nurtured in the depths of past adversities. The rain continued to pour, the rhythmic patter on the asphalt echoing like the ticking of an ominous clock. Henderson's gaze narrowed as he surveyed Michael from head to toe, his nostrils flaring slightly as he caught the faint scent of cologne mixed with the musty aroma of damp fabric, a scent that, in that moment, reminded him of the innocence lost in a time when he too had once believed in justice. Yet such thoughts were fleeting, quickly supplanted by the urgency of asserting his authority. In that fleeting instant, memories of past incidents surged through Henderson's mind, a collage of bitter flashbacks that painted his early career with shades of brutality. He recalled the incident 2 years prior, when his own rash decision had led to an unjust beating, a decision that had been smothered by the indifference of higher-ups. Even then, his uniform had seemed to weigh more heavily, a tangible reminder of a burden he carried, a burden of power misused, and the subsequent erosion of honor. Now his uniform felt oppressive in a different way, as if it had become a tool of degradation rather than protection. A low hum from a nearby air conditioner mingled with the clicking of a voice recorder in the pocket of a bystander, a local activist who had long watched the events unfold with a critical eye. The sound was both mundane and menacing, as if chronicling every word, every gesture, every injustice that transpired on these rain-slicked streets. That subtle click served as an unintentional metronome to the unfolding drama, an auditory witness to the state of decay that had infiltrated the very soul of the community. Henderson stepped closer, his posture rigid with authority, his eyes glinting with a cold determination. "Don't think you're clever, son," he spat, his words punctuated by the deliberate drag of his boots across the wet pavement, a sound reminiscent of a judge's gavel, final and irrevocable. Michael's expression remained unchanged, his calm demeanor belying an inner tempest that simmered just beneath the surface. In the background, The murmur of distant voices and the occasional splatter of rain on the worn cobblestones provided an eerie counterpoint to the confrontation. A fellow officer, whose loyalty wavered between duty and a growing disillusionment with the system, observed the scene from a shadowed doorway. His eyes, filled with uncertainty, betrayed an internal conflict, one that would later lead him to choices that could either undermine or uphold the order he was sworn to protect. As the tension escalated, Michael's thoughts drifted to memories of his childhood, a time when his father, a renowned human rights activist, had instilled in him the strength to confront injustice, no matter how deeply embedded it was within society. Those quiet evenings filled with discussions of morality, fairness, and the importance of standing up for the oppressed had shaped him into a man capable of bearing the weight of the world's inequities. Now, confronted with the cruelty of a man who personified the corruption of power, Michael felt an almost imperceptible shift within himself, a gathering of resolve that promised retribution without a thirst for personal vengeance. Henderson, oblivious to the inner workings of Michael's mind, advanced with an air of finality. His uniform, which had once symbolized a noble calling, now seemed to envelop him in a shroud of menace and hubris. "You think you're smart, don't you?" he barked, a sneer twisting his features. The sound of his leather belt's subtle creak accompanied his harsh words, as if the very material of his authority was straining against the weight of his own corruption. Michael's voice remained cool as ice. "I'm simply ensuring that every action is accounted for," he replied, his tone laden with a promise of hidden repercussions. The cadence of his words was unhurried, deliberate, a stark contrast to the rapid, aggressive movements of his assailant. In that suspended moment, the rain intensified, each drop hammering the pavement as though in defiance of the tyranny unfolding before them. In a final, fateful moment of decision, Henderson's eyes gleamed with a reckless mixture of arrogance and vindictiveness. He reached into the glove compartment of his patrol car, retrieving a set of keys with a metallic clatter that resonated in the charged air. Without another word, he signaled to his partner, a man whose loyalty had long been compromised by unspoken bargains, and ordered, "Lock him up now." The command was as abrupt as it was damning, sealing Michael's fate in a single, unyielding stroke of authoritarian decree. As Michael was forcibly apprehended, the confrontation reached its climactic conclusion. The rain, now a relentless torrent, seemed to wash away the remnants of dignity from his body, leaving him exposed and vulnerable in the midst of a societal crucible. The harsh lighting of the street lamps illuminated his face, revealing not just the physical pain of his unjust treatment, but also a profound internal resolve that hinted at the untold depths of his concealed identity. Behind the facade of authority, as the officer's boots stomped unyieldingly on the drenched asphalt and the click of the recording device captured every moment, an undercurrent of resistance was silently building. Michael's quiet defiance, the memory of his father's teachings, and the subtle determination in his eyes all spoke of a future where the scales of justice might finally be balanced, though at a price that the corrupt system would soon have to reckon with. In that pivotal moment, as the uniformed man's hand closed around Michael's arm, it was not merely an arrest that was being carried out. It was a proclamation of systemic decay, a harbinger of consequences yet to come. The broken light above them, once a symbol of neglect and decay, flickered ominously, mirroring the broken spirit of the community. Little did Henderson know that his actions, driven by a history of abuse and unchecked authority, would set in motion a series of events that would challenge the very foundation of the system he had sworn to protect. The night was far from over. Amid the cacophony of rain, the creak of leather, and the persistent click of the recorder, the seeds of revolution and retribution were sown. The finality of Henderson's decision was palpable, yet in that moment of cruelty lay the unwitting promise of eventual triumph, a promise that the oppressed, armed with hidden strengths and unyielding resolve, would someday reclaim the dignity that had been so callously stripped away. And so, under the watchful eyes of a city that had long forgotten how to care, the stage was set. Michael, marked by humiliation yet fortified by an inner light, was thrust into the heart of a battle that extended far beyond a single rain-soaked encounter. The night whispered of consequences, of systemic failures, and of a coming reckoning that would expose the rot beneath the veneer of authority, a reckoning that began with one fateful, irreversible decision. In the sterile light of the interrogation room, Michael's demeanor transformed. The rain had subsided outside, leaving the city cloaked in a heavy, uncertain silence, but inside that room, the atmosphere was electric with anticipation. The air reeked of disinfectant, a smell so potent that it masked the underlying tension. The sound of a faint, persistent hum from the air conditioner filled the spaces between words, underscoring the gravity of what was about to unfold. Michael, still cuffed and carried the marks of his earlier mistreatment, remained unnervingly composed. His eyes, once a mirror of quiet defiance, now shone with an unmistakable authority. Slowly, he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small, sleek card, a federal court document that identified him as a high-ranking official in a specialized division with sweeping powers over civil rights enforcement. The card glinted under the fluorescent light, its edges worn but its significance undeniable. Across the room, Officer Raymond Henderson, his uniform already seeming to press down on him like an unbearable weight, faltered for a moment. The earlier bravado in his eyes gave way to a flicker of panic as beads of sweat gathered at his temples. The room, with its broken handcuffs scattered on the tiled floor and a faded Confederate flag hanging limply on a stained wall, became a stage for a power shift that was as swift as it was unexpected. Before Henderson could muster a response, Michael activated a voice recorder from within his jacket. The subtle click of the device punctuated the charged silence, its recorded testimony ready to capture every word. The act was both symbolic and strategic, a silent declaration that every injustice, every abuse of power, would now be immortalized in digital evidence. As the recorder began its steady tick, Michael's posture straightened. His presence filled the room, commanding attention not by physical force but by the sheer weight of truth. The air in the room thickened with tension as Michael reached for his phone. With deliberate precision, he dialed a number that resonated with authority, a number known to ring through the halls of power and command influence far beyond the local precinct. The call connected, and in the background, a calm, authoritative voice answered. It was the voice of an influential ally, one whose intervention had the potential to bring down corrupt empires with a single phone call. As Michael quietly explained the situation, his tone was resolute, laced with a sense of inevitability that even the most corrupt of officials could not ignore. Henderson, trying desperately to salvage the situation, cleared his throat and stammered, This is a misunderstanding. I was just doing my duty." His words were clipped and weak, a stark contrast to the smooth cadence of Michael's measured responses. His eyes flitted anxiously towards the cameras that silently observed from the corner of the room, those unblinking witnesses that had long recorded every misstep of his career. The realization of being caught in a web of his own making intensified his panic. "You thought my skin color made me weak," Michael said, his voice resonating with quiet triumph as he slowly looked down at Henderson. His words were not an accusation but an undeniable declaration of his hidden power. "You were mistaken. Now your career is ash." The statement reverberated in the enclosed space like a judge's gavel, a final sentence delivered with precision and inevitability. Each word was imbued with the weight of years of suppression, each syllable a repudiation of the old order that had allowed such abuses to flourish. The moment was charged with symbolic resonance. The broken handcuffs on the floor, once a sign of the arbitrary restraint of power, now lay as a silent testament to the collapse of an outdated system. The faded Confederate flag, its colors muted by time and neglect, seemed to recoil in the presence of Michael's undeniable authority. A relic of an era long past, rendered impotent in the face of modern accountability. Henderson's face contorted with a mix of indignation and dread. His voice, now trembling, attempted to justify his actions. "It's just, I followed orders," he muttered, barely audible over the persistent hum of the air conditioner. The worn leather of his belt, which had creaked as he moved earlier, now served as a stark reminder of the weight of his transgressions. His body language betrayed him. The once firm stance had crumbled into one of desperation, as if the uniform he wore had suddenly become a prison rather than a symbol of authority. As the recording continued, Michael's calm and deliberate words wove a narrative of empowerment. His demeanor, unruffled by Henderson's outbursts, evoked memories of his childhood, memories where his father, a human rights activist, had instilled in him the unyielding belief that justice must always prevail. Each moment of the past echoed through the room, reinforcing Michael's resolve. The scars of past indignities had not broken him. Rather, they had forged within him a quiet strength that now radiated with undeniable power. The influential ally on the phone had already promised swift intervention, a reminder that corruption, no matter how deeply embedded, could not remain unchallenged forever. Michael's measured steps, punctuated by the soft, deliberate click of the recorder, turned the tables irreversibly. The meticulous unveiling of his status was not merely an act of self-defense. It was a statement to all who had long suffered under the tyranny of abuse. The message was clear. Truth, once revealed, carried with it the power to dismantle even the most deeply entrenched hierarchies. Henderson's attempt at justification crumbled further as the cameras captured every trembling detail of his transformation, from a man who once strode with arrogant confidence to one whose resolve was now visibly eroded by the imminent collapse of his career. The air in the room seemed to vibrate with the finality of Michael's words, a vibration that promised retribution and a new order rooted in accountability. In that moment, as the voice recorder continued its steady documentation and the influential call on the other end of the line grew more urgent, Michael's revelation of his hidden authority became a turning point. The systemic abuses that had long been the domain of a select few were being exposed for what they were, relics of a past that no longer held sway in the face of resolute, evidence-backed truth. With every passing second, the balance of power shifted, leaving behind a trail of exposed corruption and a promise of systemic change. And so, amidst the sterile brightness of the interrogation room and the lingering sense of disinfectant and worn leather, Michael stood as a testament to the enduring power of truth. His revelation dismantled the facade of authority that had been built on lies and prejudice, heralding the beginning of a reckoning that would not only redefine individual fates, but also the very fabric of a system long resistant to change. The storm of revelations had long passed through the city, leaving a trail of broken authority and raw determination in its wake. In the wake of the leaked recordings, files splashed across the internet with undeniable evidence of corruption. Public outrage surged like wildfire. Crowds gathered in the city center, brandishing placards that screamed "Down with racism" and "Justice now." As they marched through rain-slicked streets, the relentless hum of protest chants filled the air, merging with the distant clamor of sirens and the persistent aroma of coffee from a nearby vending machine that offered a moment of bitter comfort amid the chaos. At the heart of the storm was the now infamous officer Raymond Henderson. His public image had crumbled like the shattered glass of broken windows during midnight raids. Television screens across the nation broadcast his fall from grace. In a widely viewed interview on CNN, a tear-streaked Michael, no longer the silent victim but a symbol of resilient justice, spoke with a measured calm. "The system may have been built on a foundation of silence and complicity," he declared, his voice echoing through the studio. "But today, it has given way to accountability. Today, it gave a crack." His words resonated with a truth that could no longer be ignored. Henderson's downfall was as swift as it was comprehensive. The once imposing figure in uniform was unmasked not only before the public, but within his own personal life. His wife, embittered by years of complicity in the public disgrace that now encroached upon their private life, had left him. Their separation had been as bitter as it was inevitable, leaving him to face a storm of isolation. His teenage child, caught between the echoes of his father's past glories and the stark reality of his misdeeds, now looked upon him with an unmistakable sense of shame. In the confines of a stark, poorly lit apartment, the boy's silence spoke louder than any reproach, an unspoken verdict on a father whose actions had left an indelible mark of disgrace. In the corridors of power, the reverberations of the scandal forced a reckoning. The department, once shrouded in the comfortable haze of impunity, instituted sweeping reforms. A once downtrodden street, stained by the echoes of past injustices, was renamed in honor of a legendary civil rights activist, a nod to the enduring spirit of resistance that had long been suppressed. Mandatory sensitivity and ethics training for officers became the norm, a small but crucial step toward a system that finally acknowledged its failings. At the site of the infamous confrontation, where the broken handcuffs and the faded Confederate flag had borne silent witness to the corruption of power, a humble memorial plaque was installed. It read like a promise, a commitment to remembrance, and a vow that the mistakes of the past would serve as a guidepost for a fairer future. The transformation was not without its scars. In the polished corridors of the courthouse, where the scent of disinfectant still clung to every surface, officials spoke in hushed tones about the recent upheaval. Whispers of reform mingled with memories of abuse, while the steady drone of the air conditioner served as a constant reminder of the enduring bureaucracy that still lingered despite the seismic shift. The precinct, once suffused with the dust of neglect and the stale odor of compromised justice, now buzzed with an uncertain hope, a hope that, if nurtured, might one day blossom into genuine systemic change. Amid this turbulent backdrop, Michael's voice emerged one final time. Standing before a crowd gathered at the newly renamed street, a place that now bore the name of an activist who had once risked everything for the truth, he delivered a final monologue. His eyes, reflecting both the resolve of a fighter and the sorrow of a witness, swept over the assembly. Every face in the crowd, whether lined with hardship or illuminated by newfound hope, was etched with the determination to prevent history from repeating itself. With a calm that belied the storm of emotions within, he spoke. "The system will not break as long as we remain silent." But today it gave a crack. The words rippled through the gathered masses, stirring memories of past injustices and igniting a collective desire for reformation. Michael's declaration was not merely a denunciation of a corrupt past, but a clarion call for continued vigilance, a reminder that the burden of change rested on the shoulders of every citizen. The final monologue, steeped in the gravity of the moment, became a symbolic exclamation point on an era of decay, heralding the start of an arduous journey toward healing and accountability. In that moment, the entire city felt the weight of transformation. The public scandal, the personal ruin of a once powerful figure, and the ensuing reforms all coalesced into a powerful narrative of resistance and renewal. The system, once believed to be indomitable, had revealed its deepest vulnerabilities, a vulnerability that the people, united in purpose and unafraid to speak the truth, were determined to mend. The scars of the past would serve as a constant reminder that every crack in the facade of authority was an opportunity for justice to seep in and transform what had long been broken.